to dine at the White House. He was an educator and a successful entrepreneur, and he had become the proverbial shining example to his people, a model of how through grit and sweat a black man could climb to the top, as long as he knew his place.
This is Booker T. Washington. He lifted the veil of ignorance from his people and pointed the way to progress through education and industry. At the beginning of the 20th century, Booker T. Washington was the most powerful and the best-known black man, not only in the United States, but in the world. Always my story. It became an immediate bestseller. The book told how he had been born a slave in a little shack on a plantation in Virginia, was 7 years old at emancipation, poor, illiterate, hungry. How he worked so hard and so long to get an education, and once he got it, how he dreamed and struggled to bring it to the rest of his people. The opportunity to do that came to Booker at Tuskegee, Alabama, where they needed someone to build a normal school. That's a school for teaching teachers, and he was just the man for the job. Starting with an old chapel and a handful of students, Booker T. Washington opened Tuskegee in 1881. He believed that the salvation of the Negro race was manual labor, things that a man or a woman could do with their hands, farming, building, cooking, sewing, animal husbandry, shoemaking, and the like. And so, Booker T. Washington and his students, with their own hands, brick by brick, built the school. And over the next 20 years, it became one of the major educational institutions in the South. Consider now the world as it must have looked to Booker T. Washington while he was building this miracle called Tuskegee Institute. The Civil War was over, Reconstruction was dead, and political coalitions between blacks and whites trying to vote their common interests failed miserably at the ballot box. The 14th Amendment might just as well have never been written. Lynching, peonage, rape, pillage, and even murder was commonplace. And none of the crimes against black folks were ever punished. The black folks were getting impatient, the South was getting stubborn, and the North was getting bored. Somebody had to do something quick before the situation between the races got completely out of hand. While traveling all over the country to raise funds to build Tuskegee, Booker met many rich and powerful men, industrialists, philanthropists, some of whom became his mentors, his idols, and even his friends. Like Andrew Carnegie, for whom he named this building, the founder of U.S. Steel, John D. Rockefeller, the father of Standard Oil, for whom he had a building over there, John Henry Ford, Thomas Alva Edison. Now, all of these men had started out poor, like Booker, and by sheer pluck and grit, self-determination, and hard work, each had built an empire, and in the process had become the richest, most powerful men in America. Booker listened, and Booker learned. Business, the bigger the better, and not reform, was America's new religion. Industry had to come first, not civil rights, if the South was ever to get back on its feet. And that black people, as a natural pool of cheap and available labor, could provide the base for a new economic order in the South with wealth enough for everybody, especially for those who, like Booker T. Washington, had already proved they knew exactly what to do with all that wealth. All that was needed was somebody big enough, powerful enough, with grit and gumption enough and vision to pull the whole thing together. And Booker, after thinking long and hard, concluded that that somebody was him. Everything he accomplished at Tuskegee proved it. But how could he, a black man, prove to the rest of the nation that he had been sent into the world to redeem the South? His chance came in 1895, when Professor Booker T. Washington was invited to come to the Atlanta Cotton States Exposition and make one of the opening day speeches. Every day, Booker would come into his study and practice that speech. He had to be careful. He would be polite, thank the board of directors. This magnificent exposition he would begin will do more to cement the friendship between the races than any occurrence since the dawn of our freedom. And then he would make sure they understood that black folks no longer depended on the Congress or the courts or on politics. Ignorant and inexperienced, he would continue, it is not strange that in the early years of our new life, we began at the top instead of at the bottom, that a seat in Congress or the state legislature was more sought than real estate or industrial skill. But if politics was not to be the solution, what was? Business. Bear in mind, Booker would continue, whatever other sins the South must bear, when it comes to business, pure and simple, it is in the South that the Negro is given a man's chance in the commercial world. And what was Booker prepared to sacrifice in exchange for this man's chance in the commercial world? The 14th Amendment. The wisest among my race understands that agitation of the questions of social equality is the extremist folly, and that all progress and the privileges which will come to us must be the result of constant and severe struggle and not of artificial forcing. In all things that are purely social, we can be as separate as the fingers, yet one as the hand in all that is essential to mutual progress. And then, as if to make absolutely certain they understood his good intentions, Booker would hand black labor over into the tender mercies of old master and the plantation economy. As we have proved our loyalty to you in the past, in nursing your children, and watching over the sick beds of your mothers and fathers, and often following them with tear-dimmed eyes to their graves, so in the future, in our own humble way, we will stand by you with a devotion that no foreigner can approach, ready to lay down our lives if need be in defense of yours, interlacing our industrial, commercial, civil, and religious life with yours in a way that will make the interest of both races one.
Money poured into Tuskegee from all over, especially from Booker's northern white philanthropist friends like George Foster Peabody, William H. Baldwin, and especially Andrew Carnegie. Invitations to speak came from all over the country, and he was not one to turn down the opportunity to spread the Tuskegee idea. And speak he did, wherever a crowd would gather, in rail yards, at political rallies, before groups of farmers. Booker's opinion was sought by whites and blacks, high and low, about every aspect of black life, especially in the South. Soon, he had veto power over all the educational funds to all the institutions in the South, as well as over who should be appointed to political office. Without knowing it, without really seeking it, Booker T. Washington became one of the biggest power brokers in the Republican Party.
1896 that the Supreme Court gave official constitutional blessing to Booker T. Washington's deal in a landmark decision, Plessy versus Ferguson. Homer Plessy, a citizen of Louisiana who was just 1/8 black, was ordered to move out of a streetcar seat reserved for whites only. When he refused, he was arrested. In court, he contended that segregated seating was a violation of his rights under the 14th Amendment. No, said the court, the states could separate the races so long as their accommodations were equal. The result was to leave the fate of black Americans to the states, for each to decide as it saw fit. There followed a flood of laws that carried an odd and ugly name, Jim Crow. Jim Crow was originally a comic character in a minstrel show song, then by extension, any black. And finally, it was the label for a whole body of statutes and customs designed to put the Negro down and keep him down.